Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of BacklogBusters, where I'm busting out my gaming backlog one video at a time and letting you know if after all these years, these games are worth playing today. In this episode, we're finding a ladder in a dream and climbing into the weirdest Mario adventure yet. Why am I going back to finish Super Mario Bros. 2 34 years after its original release? Well, in looking back at older games on my digital and physical shelves of my gaming backlog, I finished almost every main series Super Mario game with the exception of Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels and this game, so now felt like the perfect time to fill in this gap in my Mario history. I feel like the history of Super Mario Bros. Is probably the most well-known fun fact about the Mario series, so let's breeze through this. Nintendo's Nintendo Research and Development No. 4 department, or Nintendo R&D 4 for short, is Nintendo's largest development group in the company, according to Wikipedia at least. And they worked on Super Mario, Legend of Zelda, F-Zero, and Star Fox, and a lot more. They're now known as Nintendo EAD. Well, on September 13th, 1985, R&D 4 released Super Mario Bros. For the Famicom, as it was known in Japan, and Nintendo Entertainment System here, or NES. Then they released Super Mario Bros. 2, or as we know it in the US, Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels, less than a year later on June 3rd, 1986 in Japan. That game was deemed too difficult by Nintendo of America, and they instead requested something easier for the American audience. After this, R&D 4 apparently built a vertical scrolling prototype with the ability to pick up and throw blocks and players in two-player co-op. This prototype didn't really move forward until they were asked to use that base to create, and I'm gonna mispronounce this, Yume Kojo Doki Doki Panic, which I didn't know was only released as a kind of advertisement partnership with Fuji Television mascots in Japan only on July 10th, 1987. That finished game was chosen to get the conversion to use Mario characters for the American market. So on October 9th, 1988, we finally got our version of Super Mario Bros. 2. With that history out of the way, let's start with the things I liked about this game. Maybe the most obvious thing I liked about this game is that it feels like a 2D Mario game. There are probably some small differences in momentum, jump length, and so on that if I played Mario 1, 2, and 3 back to back, I'd notice, but overall, I felt very at home booting it up, choosing Mario. Nothing felt overly weird control-wise, and it still feels great to move around like all the 2D Mario games. It's also got great music, which, while it feels a little different from more traditional Mario stuff, I've heard these songs so many times throughout the years that they all sound like classic, nostalgic Mario music to me. And I've been humming these for weeks since I got done playing this game. The big new feature of this game is Mario's shocking new ability to lift things above his head for the first time ever. I'm not sure if he's got new gusseted overalls or what's going on, but where previously he could only hold shells at chest level, max, him and all of his friends can rip vegetables straight up out of the ground, hold them over their heads, and throw them at a really pitiful angle. Maybe after a few more adventures, they'll be able to throw further. According to the story setup, this game all happens in a dream of Mario's, and I guess since his normal days aren't normal, the plumber has some really creepy and weird dreams. Pipes are replaced with jars you can enter, which have the ability to shrink Mario down so he can explore inside a jar rather than just traveling to an underground like in Super Mario Bros. 1. You also encounter Pidgeots riding magic carpets. You can steal those carpets to fly through the sky yourself, really paving the way for stealing Lakitu's Cloud and Super Mario World down the line. Bosses in Super Mario Bros. 2 include crabs, mice, and more, showing that Bowser doesn't terrorize Mario's dreams at least. One of the coolest things I remember from when I played the first couple levels of this game as a kid was that some veggies you pull up turn out to be full scientific vials filled with blood red bubbling liquid, which spawns entire doors when they hit the ground for some reason. Entering these takes you to another dimension in which you hear Super Mario Bros. 1 music, 1-up mushrooms are in there, and even coins. Not sure if this is Mario lucid dreaming to open a portal back to his own world or what's really going on here, but as a child I assumed this was a whole second game hidden in there and you just had to drop these doors at the right spot to see it. After completing the game, it turns out that you just get one screen, you can't move left or right, and if it's not placed in the right spot or you already ate all your veggies, it's kind of useless. If you played it correctly, you can pull up Super Mario Bros. 1 coins instead of veggies, which Mario never forgets to spend in the casino at the end of each stage. Then there's Birdo, who looks like a bootleg Yoshi, but instead of throwing eggs, shoots them out of their mouth. You'll end up fighting several different colors of Birdo, which increase in difficulty as the game goes on, with each spitting faster than the last and mixing in more fireballs with the normal eggs. These battles are pretty fun to start with you hopping on eggs to throw them back, and I remember the idea of riding a projectile that could be reversed and actually used as a weapon blowing me away as a kid. But while starting fun, these battles do get really difficult later in the game. My only issue with Birdo is that I feel like we've been lied to, because in the credits, it lists every enemy and very distinctly says this sprite is Ostro. So are all the bosses you fight named Ostro? Even though this sprite looks like Birdo, who I've been playing golf with for all these years, is the word Ostro like Yoshi, where it's more of a description of a race of creatures, not the name for an individual maybe? And Birdo's the individual who golfs and comes from a race of creatures in which Birdo's maybe the only non-villain. Or is Birdo the one deserter of Clan Ostro who befriends Mario to escape their life of war? Or is it as simple as the Mario Wiki says and the names Ostro and Birdo were mistakenly swapped? No, it can't be that simple. I, for one, can't wait for the untitled Super Mario project coming to theaters next year to clear up the greatest mystery of our time. Super Mario Bros. 2 actually got a really nice port to the Super Nintendo in 1993 as Super Mario All-Stars, which included Super Mario 1, Lost Levels, 2, and 3. For this episode, I played through Super Mario Bros. 2 in the All-Stars collection, and was really impressed with how it looked and played, that it made me wonder if I'd forgotten what the NES version looked and played like. So I booted up Super Mario Bros. 2 for the NES and played through it. And the games are nearly identical gameplay-wise, but the SNES game benefits greatly from the enhanced graphics. I mean, look at the insides of these jars on the NES versus the SNES, or even just the amount of changes in the first fight with Birdo. The SNES version is a really nice upgrade, with no real downsides as far as I could tell in my time finishing both games back to back. Then wondering just how good the sprite work could get, I went and played through the Game Boy Advance remake to see how it stacked up, and it's kind of just the same as the SNES version, but with some extra stretching and scaling effects and a few big enemies and vegetables and a couple different bosses. Mario's dreams are filled with some haunting things. After being burned by an empty castle one too many times in Super Mario Bros. 1, it seems Mario instead imagines a better world, where every level ends with him being consumed by a large bird head, which requires an egg pearl thing from a pink Yoshi-like dinosaur who's also kind of named after a bird. It seems like Mario might just have some confusion and unanswered questions about birds in general. But the most unnerving thing in Super Mario Bros. 2 are the Phantos. These creepy masks just decorate the background around some keys Mario needs for locked doors. That is until you pick up a key, at which point they come alive and chase you relentlessly in and out of rooms, jars, and just about anywhere you try to run. I was always stressed out when getting a key and having to avoid these things, and I remember being genuinely scared as a child seeing these come alive for the first time, and honestly the same dread is there today. There's also some interesting level designs in this game. For instance, one level is a castle, but unlike just a bunch of stone sprites like in Super Mario Bros. 1, these castle levels actually have you traveling in and outside of the castle in a very convincing way, even with the limited sprites of the NES version. And it just gets more effective with the other versions, SNES and on. Also, the verticality is a great change, especially if you're coming from Mario Bros. 1. I just felt like these levels in 2 were so much more involved, and it really felt like an adventure across a strange land more than just a horizontal strip of platforms and obstacles. I know Super Mario Bros. 1 has great level design, but even the seemingly small additions of doors allows for much more complicated levels that make you feel like you're in more of a world that extends past the bounds of the screen. I'll just say this up front, Peach is the best character in this game. The game adds 3 new playable characters with different abilities. Mario is the basic all-arounder, Toad gets a boost of speed, but shorter jump, and Peach, the best character in the game, has a slower speed, but an invaluable hover ability, which gives you leeway in some of the precision jumps, while also allowing you to cover a lot of horizontal distance with each jump. Now, Peach and Toad do both share the shorter jump, which means you'll be using the, I assume only documented in the manual that I don't have, charge jump ability, which requires you to hold down on the D-pad until your character flashes to launch into a taller jump. You do have a sweet backflip on the GBA version during this charge jump, and it might be the coolest and best change the GBA version makes. I only learned the charge jump by mistake, which solves a mystery that's been unsolved in my mind for years about how to jump up to this ledge in the first level. as I didn't know as a child this ability existed because who just crouches for like 5 seconds straight by accident? The character options in this game are great, unless you try and pick the ghost hunting brother Luigi. What even is this jump? Luigi's feet flutter like Yoshi in later games, but it's not quite Yoshi's Island where you get a tiny bit of extra height at the end of the jump. It's not useful like Peach's hover, and it feels nothing like Luigi's jump in the new Super Mario Bros. Games later. The second after you jump with Luigi, you begin your slow descent to the ground. Unlike Yoshi's flutter jump, you can't press or release anything to land quicker like Mario would. It just feels so sluggish and wrong. I tried one level with Luigi and barely even completed the level. Luigi's floaty descent feels like a big downgrade in control and gets you into so many bad situations. Having a slightly taller height on this jump is not at all worth this trade-off. There's no denying that Super Mario Bros. 2 is an old game. It exists pretty early in the history of Nintendo as a video game company. So a lot of the frustrations I'm about to run through, I'm assuming were lessons Nintendo carried into its future games because I don't see much of this in later Mario games. First, ladders and vines. These feel like they're 1 pixel wide, and I constantly fell off these while trying to just hold up and stay on, or try to ready myself to leap to another vine or ladder nearby. Earlier I mentioned Birdo gains the ability to shoot fireballs. Well, get ready for some fights with just a rain of fire that barely lets up enough for you to attack, or bombs that are thrown in such quick succession you risk dying by explosion just when trying to pick them up, or bosses that require blocks to be thrown at them, yet they can stand in or on top of your projectile, blocking you from ever retrieving it again. The inclusion of carpal tunnel inducing and boring digging that's slow, even though I was mashing the pickup button like my life was on the line in a game of Mario Party. Or cheap deaths from enemies throwing projectiles from off-screen in front of areas too tight to jump or walk through. Masks that chase you with such relentless speed and weird flying patterns while you're stuck in tiny hallways that I'm not sure how to get through without taking a hit. Most of these are small things, but they do add up to a lot of frustrating moments in these levels. I thought that maybe I just hadn't gotten the hang of the controls, but I ended up playing through this game 3 different times across the NES, Super Nintendo, and Game Boy Advance versions, and each time I got frustrated at the same places. And this is another argument for the use of save states and the rewind features included in the Nintendo Switch versions of these games. The part of the game I didn't even give a second thought to at first became one of the most annoying things to deal with as the game went on. The screen transition. Super Mario Bros. 1 features a perfectly smooth scrolling as you run through levels horizontally, and the apparent prototype for this game was all about traveling vertically. But it's not smooth in this game. It's a pause as the screen scrolls up and then unpauses to let you continue up or down. This pause caused me so many accidental deaths as I just became more and more annoyed as I went through the game. Enemies are hidden off screen where you can't see or interact with them until you travel up or down, where you can end up right in the path of a projectile or enemy the second the game unpauses. There's no way to make sure you can enter the next screen in a safe spot because you can't see the upcoming screen until it's too late. And also the thing I remember from 4-player co-op in New Super Mario Bros. Game for the Wii is that when a character died, the whole game would pause for just a second, and that small pause was enough to throw off all your jumps and plans just out the window. The same thing happens here. That small pause messes with my head and makes it really hard to smoothly perform any actions coming out of the screen transition. It always felt like you needed a second or two to regroup after the transition, because while all the horizontal sections are smooth and have a great flow to the gameplay, this is just a jarring transition that just throws me off so badly. And unless I'm missing some clue, it's impossible to tell what's a bottomless pit that kills you if you try to hop down into it, versus what's an area you can travel down to. Even some areas allow you to travel up by ladder, but if you hop down beside the ladder, you'll die. Then we get to the biggest downside of the Game Boy Advance version, the screen squish. The GBA has a smaller screen, so Nintendo could either make things as small as possible with the screen, or basically do a zoom in to make things easier to view on the small screen. They chose the zoom in, and this causes the screen transition to happen way more often. You can also see less of what's in front and behind you, making enemies appear out of nowhere and launch projectiles with no heads up. It makes the frustrating pauses during screen transitions way more frequent as you hit them more and more often on the squish screen. After playing through the NES, Super NES, and GBA versions, the GBA is by far the worst, just because your gameplay is interrupted so much by the screen transition and the fact that you're not able to see that much of what's ahead of you or behind you either. Now, with all that in mind, how did I feel about this game overall, and would I recommend Super Mario Bros. 2 as a game that should be on your backlog? On the good side, it's a much better Mario game than I remembered from the few times I tried to play it in the past. The addition of multiple characters adds fun options for about 3/4 of the cast. The levels are different from normal Mario fare, but fun in their own unique ways and have weird worlds filled with creepy enemies. On the bad side, you've got the screen transition and pause that I never got used to, always threw me off, especially on the GBA version. Then a lot of little frustrations that stacked up for me, especially when compared to other 2D Mario games. This all comes together to form a recommendation of maybe. I probably wouldn't put this game at the top of your gaming backlog, but if you're like me and have played all or most of the 2D Mario games and enjoy it, this is a fun change of pace. For the most part, it keeps the good control of Mario, with extra features tacked on that are just underbaked. I'll also throw out my normal message that my opinion on this game is not meant to tarnish any fond memories you have of playing this, and if you love this and still love this game, please tell me why in the comments below. I'd love to hear about your experience and talk about the parts that I really liked. If you're wanting to pick this game up, Super Mario Bros. 2 in its original NES version has been re-released on the Wii, Wii U, and 3DS eShops. But the Wii shop is shut down, the Wii U and 3DS eShops are shutting down next year, so your best route is on the Switch. With a Nintendo Switch Online membership, you can gain access to over 60 NES games, including Super Mario Bros. 2, which has 3 save slots per game, and you can save at any point you'd like, as well as a pretty awesome rewind feature to reverse a cheap death if you'd like to use it. The remake of Super Mario Bros. 2 for the SNES that's included in the Super Mario All-Stars collection was re-released on the Wii in a box copy, which has some extra fanfare for Mario's 25th anniversary. And just as before, if you have a Nintendo Switch Online membership, you can gain access to a selection of over 50 SNES games, including Super Mario All-Stars, with the same 3 save slots and rewind features. The Game Boy Advance game, confusingly titled Super Mario Advance, was only ever re-released on the Wii U Virtual Console, which again will shut down next year. But that's it for this episode of Backlog Busters. Have you played any version of Super Mario Bros. 2? What did you think? Is it a must-play game in your opinion? Does it deserve to be on others' backlogs? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to talk about it. Also, let me know if you have any suggestions for what game you think I should clear up on backlog next, and I'll work to make a video on it. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that little thumbs up button and subscribe, and if you want to get alerted whenever my next video is done being edited, don't forget to hit the bell icon. And as always, thank you all so much for watching, and see you in the next video.